Welcome to Quiet Quill, where words drift like whispers and dreams unfold. Close your eyes. Let the stories carry you beyond the noise into calm, wonder, and sleep. Tonight's story is The Teahouse at the End of the Lane. At the far end of a lane that barely remembered it was a road at all, there stood a tea house with windows like half-lidded eyes and a roof that curved in a patient smile. The sign above the entry, hand-painted in fading ink, said nothing urgent. The letters drifted softly into one another, the way reeds lean together on a slow river. Inside, the air kept the warmth of yesterday, and the floorboards kept the weight of quiet footsteps. The kettles remembered how to sing without ever needing to raise their voices. A little bell chimed when the door opened. It was the sort of bell that never felt the need to ring more than once, as if the effort of a second chime would be rude to the quiet. I came in with the dusk, and the dusk came in with me. The light was not in a hurry either. It stretched itself across tables, curl by curl, and found the patient surfaces of cups that had been waiting all day to be filled. The proprietor, some people said her name was May, and perhaps it was, though she answered to the rustle of the door just as well, looked up from polishing a saucer with a cloth already clean. Her hands moved with the slow assurance of someone who had learned the rhythm of steam and porcelain, and the small, unimportant urgencies of thirst. She nodded. I nodded back. There was a cat asleep on the shelf that held jars labelled by memory rather than letters. I watched the cat dream of nothing in particular. "Evening," said May, or maybe it was the kettle. The sound was level and kind, a voice that seemed to understand that the day had been long without needing to know why. "Evening," I answered. "Tea?" There were many teas, jars of leaves that held shadows of fields where mornings were diluted with mist. I chose or I didn't, and either way a cup arrived with a thread of steam that rose in a line almost straight before curling back, as if reminded that straight lines had no business here. I sat at a table by a window. The window watched the lane forget where it had been and decide to become a path. This was a place for people who had done enough for the day, and who had put themselves here by a series of small, obvious decisions that felt like choosing to breathe. Beyond the glass, the sky was the color of folded linen. There are places that collect hurry and send it out again. This was the other kind. People came with their pockets full of errands and their shoulders full of weather, and an hour later left with their pockets still full and their shoulders still carrying the day, but it weighed differently. The handles sat better in the hands. The seams of the pockets felt stitched with a thread that didn't pull. The tea house had a clock, and the clock had opinions about time, but they were not rigid ones. Its tick was a suggestion. Every so often the minute hand agreed to move and did so without ceremony. The hour hand was a long thinker. I watched them and didn't mind. May brought a dish of candied orange peel, the kind that tastes like sunlight remembering how to be fruit. She put it down with a nod that meant, take your time, and a nod that meant, time is already taken. The cat rearranged its paws and maintained its commitment to sleep. At another table, a person with a book turned pages that didn't trouble themselves with plot. The book described bridges, and the sound of their footsteps, and where those footsteps might have been going, which was nowhere in particular, and that was fine. The person read slowly. Every third page they closed the book on a finger and looked at the steam from their own cup, which rose and then forgot where it was going, and then decided it was already where it needed to be. When you sit in such a place, the air takes you into its routine. Your breathing becomes part of the kettle's voices. Your eyes match the way the shadows move. Your thoughts wrap themselves in cloth and cool their heels. You think about the softness of napkins and the exact curve of a spoon's bowl, and how a teaspoon reflects the room like a map bent into a circle. There is a habit the evening has in the valley where the tea house lives. The habit is to put its hands into the pockets of the hills and pull out a breeze that has learned to be polite. The breeze comes through the open door and discovers the scent of tea, which is mother of pearl, and rainwater, and everything a hand can hold without closing. It carries that scent back to the lane, which carries it to a crossroads, which carries it down to the river, which carries it to the ferry that does not always cross. The ferry rests. It watches the river imagine itself as a long, quiet animal. A lantern anoints the ferry with a cue of light. The ferryman, who may be the same person as the one who reads about bridges, leans on the railing and practices the skill of listening to nothing in particular. Tonight the river tells a story about silt and starlight, and occasionally it adds a rumour about a storm that happened last year, though it cannot remember which month it belonged to. Back in the tea house, the first cup becomes the second, not because the first was empty, but because the second had been on its way for some time. There is a way to pour that allows the tea to introduce itself to the cup without splashing, and May knows it. She rotates her wrist, and the stream lands like a string being laid gently on velvet. I think, I say, though I haven't, that the days have been busy. They learn it from one another, says May. It's fashionable. And the nights? The nights are traditionalists. She smiles in the specific direction of the cat. They do as their grandparents did. Lamps, light, a small hush, a few brave crickets, a lot of steady breathing. I try a piece of candied peel and find that it tastes the way the word harbour sounds. It is impossible to eat quickly. I test this idea and discover that I am correct. I look at the clock and the clock looks back without insisting on anything. Outside, along the lane that is becoming a path, lamps come on one at a time, each with its own opinion about brightness. The first is cautious, the second believes in ceremony, the third is almost shy about it. They stand like punctuation marks in a sentence the night is writing very slowly. Someone comes in carrying a parcel wrapped in paper the colour of warm dust. They set it on a table with a sigh that begins as a person and ends as furniture. May brings a cup and a small plate with 3 slices of something that could be almond cake. It is not important exactly what it is. The person eats 1 slice and saves 2 without deciding to. The bell chimes once, approving of the choice. If you listen closely, you can hear a list the tea house makes of what it is keeping safe at any given moment. At this moment, it is keeping safe the surface tension of tea, the angle of a chair leg that does not wobble, the nap of a tablecloth, the specificity of the light at this hour, the question of rain, the decision the cat has made not to wake for another 20 minutes, the understanding that if someone were to come in, the bell would be ready without showing off. It is a list without an ending because the tea house enjoys adding to it. I look at the window again. It shows me the path's idea of the world. Soft edges, a horizon that has mislaid its ruler, trees that keep their leaves like secrets. If I were to follow that path, I would find a bridge over a stream. The bridge would be very practiced at being crossed. The stream would be very practiced at not minding. If I were to cross that bridge, I would come to a meadow where the grass lies in thoughtful patterns made by wind, deer, and people who have decided to lie down and look at clouds. There would be a woman there mending a kite that never leaves the ground. The string is long and light and tied to a post that has learned patience. She is not disappointed. She says the kite has travelled anyway. The sky has leaned down to meet it and told it about a mountain it cannot see. The mountain, for its part, is pleased to be mentioned. On some evenings the tea house receives a group of clockmakers who have finished their careful work and want to consider something that does not need repair. They drink oolong and talk in circles that are not arguments. They might bring out a pocket watch that once belonged to someone who measured their days by the quantity of sunflowers planted, or stones skipped, or windows opened to air a room. The clockmakers listen to the ticking and agree that it is an honest sound. Later they put the watch away and allow their own pulses to do the counting. When the first rain begins, it is barely audible. It taps the roof like knuckles at a door in a dream. May looks up, not to check for leaks or pots to catch drips, but because the sound has joined the list of things being kept safe. The cat accepts this without comment. The rain grows confident, then reflective, then content. It will stay for as long as it likes, and then leave without needing to apologize. Sometimes, while the rain is speaking, the door opens to a traveler who has walked a long way. Their coat has learned the vocabulary of mud. They are not dramatic about it. They order tea. They put their coat on the back of a chair, and then arrange themselves around the warmth of a cup the way a map arranges itself around a country. They say thank you in a voice that has lost its edges on the road, and the bell thinks, yes, that is a good word, and repeats it in its own language when the door closes. The traveller may tell a small story, not the kind with a beginning and a middle and an end, the kind with a beginning and then a pause, and then a sigh, and then a look out the window, as if the window could be persuaded to offer advice. For example, there is a tree near the bend in the river whose roots have decided to make a gentle fist. The tree has been doing this for a long time. If you sit with your back against the fist, it is impossible to feel unwelcome in the world. The traveller found this by accident, and kept it to themselves for 3 days before the contentment grew too large and had to be shared with the Teahouse, which is good at keeping such contentments. By now the clock has made up its mind to nudge the hour forward. The hands comply. May lights another lamp and dims the one near the door. The Teahouse rearranges its shadows the way a patient host adjusts cushions when a guest shifts in their chair. The list of things being kept safe grows. Someone's forgotten scarf, the smell of oranges, the promise that the kettle will sing again in 5 minutes, a game of dominoes that will be played tomorrow. Sometimes a baker from the town comes late and sits with a notebook, planning tomorrow's breads in the mild company of steam. They write, walnut loaf, rosemary rolls, a braid with poppy seeds, 3 trays for the market, 1 for the ferry. They close the notebook and look at the rain. The rain looks back without needing to know how many loaves make a morning. I take another sip. The tea helps my thoughts become slower than language. This is useful. The mind grows quiet enough to hear small sounds it usually steps on. The thimble sound of sugar settling in a jar. The way a chair sighs when someone stands, and the way the floor sighs when they sit. The whispery applause of pages turning somewhere else in the room. Even the air moves with the care of a librarian shelving the hour. If you step outside between 2 breaths, the night opens like a curtain that knows you are not trying to be surprising. The rain holds itself to a fine mist. The lane has become a path, and the path is comfortable with you now. The lamps approve without brightening. A little farther on the path becomes softer, then softer again, and then it is simply a suggestion, inscribed on the field by a number of feet who have agreed, without meeting, to walk this way. There is a small bridge over the stream, just as I'd thought. In the dark the stream performs its pieces for the stones along its banks, and for anyone else who likes music that doesn't mind if you forget the words. The water has practiced the art of sounding like it is going somewhere without needing to remember where. Past the bridge, the meadow breathes. A fox considers the dew, and decides the dew is not a matter that involves foxes. A bird, surprised by its own sleepiness, tries its name once, quietly, and that is enough. The kite is folded now, but the string remains tied to the post. The post maintains its patience. Farther along, the path finds the river. The ferry keeps its lantern. The ferryman's hat holds the idea of the day's weather. The brim knows what the last sunlight tasted like when it left. No one is waiting to cross, and yet the ferry floats with purpose. Sometimes its purpose is to be crossed. Sometimes its purpose is to wait. Both seem reasonable. There is a lighthouse where the river widens before it meets the lake. It is not tall. It is certain. The keeper polishes the lens with slow circles, and the light makes a measured sweep that touches the eaves of the teahouse without waking the cat. The keeper whispers to the light about ships that will not come tonight, about birds that will tuck their heads under their wings and leave the sky to stars, about the lamp oil that never goes on an adventure without being invited. The town, further inland, keeps its own edits of the night. A watchmaker sets a clock to the rhythm of a sleeping child's breathing, knowing it will tick truer than any metronome. A postman sorts letters by sound, letting the envelopes tell him which pile they belong in by the weight of their paper and the softness of their corners. A seamstress leaves her needle threaded and leans her head briefly against the fabric, not to sleep, but to listen to the cloth, remembering fields of flax and hands and daylight. No one in town is in a hurry to attend to the idea of tomorrow. Tomorrow is waiting where it always waits, like a coat on a peg near the door. You will put it on when you are ready to leave, and not before. When I return to the tea house, there is a new cup waiting. May has a way of anticipating what will help without presuming to decide. The steam offers a greeting and a suggestion. The suggestion is to stay. The greeting is to be easy here. I sit again. The bell has grown discreet with rain and night. It decides to skip its remark when the door closes behind me. The clock, in a benevolent mood, allows me to ignore it completely. The cat, more accommodating than most saints, extends a paw in my direction and then resumes its dream of corridors of sun. May asks, not with words, whether I might like something sweet again. She leaves a plate with 3 almond slices. I make a different choice this time, and eat 2 and save 1, and the bell is impressed by my spontaneity. From one of the shadowed tables a soft humming begins. The tune is not about anything. A note returns to itself several times before it makes a small decision to continue, and then takes its time getting where it is going. The humming joins the rain, which has grown like a patient vine. Together they travel around the room and ask everyone's names and receive answers that are less like words and more like a kind of comfortable breathing. The evening, which was already well behaved, settles even deeper into itself. If it were water, you could rest your hand on it without getting wet. If it were a quilt, you could find the seams without waking the person sleeping beneath. One of the clockmakers stands to leave, but before they go they wind the wall clock in the corner. It is not necessary. The clock is on time for the sort of time the tea house keeps, but the gesture pleases the clock and gives the clockmaker a sense of being useful without needing to achieve anything measurable. The clock thanks them in a voice only clocks use, a kind of soft, sensible optimism. Outside, the rain gives itself a break. The drops become farther apart, like the last applause before a curtain lowers. The air smells like metal and leaf and the sweet ghost of the oranges from the plate. Somewhere nearby, a cart's wheel settles in its rut with the sound of a sentence deciding to end. May brings a bowl of warm water for the traveller to wash their hands. Steam moves up in thoughtful scrolls. The traveller lowers their fingers into the water and seems to set down the day in the bowl beside the towel. It is a respectable way to be rid of anything that has lasted longer than it needed to. Later, when the door opens again, a child in a yellow raincoat steps in with great ceremony and hands May a folded square of paper. The paper is slightly damp and clearly important. May accepts it as if it were a map. The child says, with the gravity of someone who has discovered a pebble shaped like a crescent moon, that the paper is a map. May nods and offers the child a cup of warm milk sweetened with a touch of honey. The child drinks it slowly because the milk is very obviously a map of a gentle country with rivers where boats are only as fast as they need to be. The child leaves with the same ceremony and the same bell chime. The lantern on the ferry, which could not have known about the paper map, nevertheless straightens its light in agreement that maps are good things. By now, the tea house has become the kind of warm that feels heavier than air, a blanket drawn from a cedar chest and shaken once before it lies over a lap. Even the corners of the room have lost any ambition to be anywhere else. The list of things being kept safe is long enough that it loops back into itself and becomes simply a feeling of correctness, not rightness, not wrongness, the kind of correctness a key feels when it sits in a pocket with nothing to unlock. May sits for a moment at my table with her own cup. She does not sit because she is tired. She sits because the night has made room for all of us to be people who are sitting. We watch the rain not raining. We watch the clock not insisting. We watch the cat perform the dignified task of sleeping. May says, after a time during which several thoughts settle without needing to be reported, that in the morning she will bake a loaf with sesame seeds that pretend to be stars. I say that seems exactly right. Across the room someone writes a letter they will not send. They address it to a street that may not be on any map except the one in the child's pocket, and to a house that may never have been built. In the letter they write about the sound of tea being poured and the lighted arc of the lighthouse and the confidence of the ferry. They explain that if one were to come at dusk, one would be welcomed by a bell that knows the weight of doors and evenings. They fold the letter and put it under their saucer to keep it flat. The saucer is proud of this responsibility. Another hour might pass. Or perhaps it already has. The Teahouse does not argue. If I were to stand and stretch, I would find my limbs had become gentle. If I were to open the door, I would find the air had prepared itself to be breathed with minimal effort. If I were to ask the night if it needed anything, it would say, without having to speak, that everything has what it needs for now. May collects plates and cups, but not from any table where the cup still has a theme to complete. When she carries the tray to the counter, I realize each saucer has been allowed to finish its own quiet thought. It is a satisfying discovery, the way finding a pebble with a smooth underside is satisfying, even if no one else sees it. Near closing, the ferryman stops in, rain on the brim of his hat like a line of commas. He leans his hip against the counter and says what ferrymen say at the end of the night, which is that the river and he have reached an understanding. Tonight, no crossings without consent. May pours him a cup that smells like the first line of a story that knows where it is going but wants to see if you'll notice. He drinks half. He leaves the other half as a promise to return before dawn. The lighthouse keeper passes as well, a shadow with a pocket of light. They lift the brim of their cap to the cat, who accepts the salute as if it were the kind of thing that happens every evening, which perhaps it is. The keeper leaves with a small package of sesame bread from tomorrow that May has allowed time to borrow in advance. The clock remarks upon something only it can observe, and its opinion is that the hour has grown comfortable where it sits, and may stay as long as it likes. If anyone wonders what the hour is, the clock is prepared to answer, but it hopes, gently, that no one will ask. At last, May dims the lamps further. The room becomes a ship. Its floorboards sway a little on seas that are not real and yet are. The walls hold their breath and then exhale. The list of things being kept safe shrinks to what it can hold while sleeping. The memory of steam, the taste of oranges, the soft nerve of a bell, the glass of the window and the way it once held a dusk, the sound of rain not raining, the curve of a spoon. Take your time, May says, and means it the way a tree means shade. I finished the last of my tea. I put the almond slice in my pocket to become a breakfast if it wants to. I stand and the chair forgives me for having borrowed its spot. I pay with coins that enjoy the feeling of being counted. The bell makes a small, satisfied sound, only once. Outside, the lane carries me like a book carries a ribbon to the place I left off. The night, all the way to its edges, is untroubled by sharpness. The lighthouse completes its slow gesture and then begins it again. The ferry holds its lantern as if it were guarding the idea of a star. When I look back, the Teahouse eyes are half-lidded again, but this time I see that they are not sleepy. They are patient. I understand, as I am meant to, that I could return tomorrow and the kettles would greet me by name, which is not a word but a pattern of footsteps. The cat would consider whether my lap had learned anything in my absence. The clock would offer me the same generous terms. The path becomes the lane again, as paths do when they realize they are ready to remember. The rain is finished for now, though the leaves still consider it. Somewhere, the child sleeps with the paper map unfolded on the bedside table, and the milk beside it in a glass that smells like honey. Somewhere, the ferryman dreams that he is a river, and wakes to find that he is a man, and that this is also acceptable. By the time I reach the turn in the road where the hedges decide to be dark green and the gravel decides to be quiet, the night has arranged itself into a room of its own, with a window that is the moon. I step into that room and turn down its covers, and lie very still, knowing that in the morning I will carry the tea-house with me, its bell and its kettle and its clock, its almond slice and its cat and its lamps, its patience and its list. And while I sleep, the tea-house does not. It keeps safe what it always keeps safe. The understanding that nothing urgent need be done. The habit of letting steam rise until it decides it has risen enough. The rule that doors should open and close once at a time. The way dusk enters a place sideways. The shape of a spoon. The kindness of a chair. The honest sound of a clock doing its quiet work. When morning comes, and it will, the way a kettle comes to singing, the sign above the door will still say nothing urgent. People will read it and then remember what they had forgotten, that a lane can be a path, that a path can be a lane, that a ferry can cross or wait and either way be a ferry, that a tea-house can keep you even when you are not inside it. And if I return, and I will, the bell will chime once, exactly once, and inside will be the same, and different. The way a second cup is not the first, but remembers what it felt like to be. Until then, the night is content to be night. The tea-house is content to be tea-house. The river is content to be river. And I am content to be carried along the quiet lane, breathing slow, remembering the taste of candied orange peel, and the way a spoon reflects a room like a map bent into a circle. That is all for tonight's story. Thank you for listening to Quiet Quill. May your dreams be kind, your thoughts be still, and your imagination carry you somewhere peaceful. Until next time, sleep well.